Now, the last thing that we have to talk about, how good will the Atlanta Falcons offense be this upcoming NFL season? Now, I have avoided talking about the Atlanta Falcons pretty much all off season, right? And I have had a good amount of Falcons fans asking me about the offense for the last couple of weeks, and I guess I can't keep running no more. So, when you look at Atlanta's offense last year, it was really underwhelming, okay? This was one of the worst offenses in the NFL. They were 26 in points per game. They were 29th in yards per game. I mean, you had old man Matt Ryan back there. And I'm glad he got traded. And the reason why I'm glad he got traded is because he was in an unfair situation that somebody of his age and his stature should never be in at that point of his career. Matt Ryan deserved to go somewhere where he has a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. So I'm glad that he got shipped off to Indianapolis, and I'm pretty sure Falcons fans were more than ready to part ways with Matt Ryan, even though there were a couple of Falcons fans, I'm pretty sure, who shed a tear, because I feel that Matt Ryan was kind of underappreciated in a sense. I think that many people gloss over the success and how good Matt Ryan was with the Falcons simply for the fact that he was never able to win the big one, which is ultimately what is a lot of people's eyes the end all be all for you. And even though Matt Ryan never won a Super Bowl, he was still one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL for well over a decade. I would consider him a top 7 quarterback for the past decade. He was really good in my opinion. But now you move on from Matt Ryan, and you're ushering in the Marcus Mariota / Desmond Ridder era, right? Now, we don't know who's going to end up starting. If you guys haven't seen, really early back in May, I did a segment on the Atlanta Falcons quarterback battle, and my pick was Desmond Ridder. And when it comes to Desmond Ridder, there are a lot of mixed reviews about him. There are people who say that he's not ready to start day one, but there are also people coming out during the NFL draft who were saying that Desmond Ridder was the most pro-ready quarterback in the NFL draft. So I don't really know what to make of Desmond Ridder when it comes to the media perception about him. But from what I've seen from Desmond Ridder on film, I definitely see a quarterback who's more than capable of being able to start week one for this team. You have a quarterback that has pretty good decision making, a really good arm, and also has a lot of mobility. He ran a 4.52 or 4.5 something during this past year's NFL Combine, so he has a lot of athleticism. The knock on Desmond Ridder is that he's really streaky. And when I say streaky, I mean that there are times when he can go hot and cold during games. There were a good amount of times last season for Cincinnati that Desmond Ridder was really inaccurate at times. And if he starts the game inaccurate, he has a high chance of finishing the game off on a high note. He doesn't have consistent performances during games. His play in games can dwindle sometimes. Sometimes he can play really good, and then he can have stretches where he just flips the switch and he just goes ice cold. So you're hoping that he can be more consistent at the NFL level. Now, he's been getting a lot of rave reviews coming out of minicamp, but every quarterback's been getting rave reviews out of minicamp. I mean, the Patriots are hyping up Mac Jones to be the next coming of Jesus. But I think that Desmond Ridder could end up winning the starting job. He is my pick to win it. However, you do have Marcus Mariota. Now, it's been a while since Marcus Mariota has been the starting quarterback in the NFL. However, he's been one of the best backup options, so I'm glad that we finally have an opportunity to see him fighting for the shot at being the starting quarterback for Atlanta this year. And I don't think Mariota was ever a bad quarterback during his time in Tennessee. His first couple of seasons went pretty well, but the thing with Mariota is that injuries started to catch up with him. He couldn't stay healthy, and that's kind of what derailed his career, because many people forget that Marcus Mariota won a playoff game. And it was actually a playoff game that he led Tennessee in the comeback effort from behind. So for Mariota, you have a lot of experience. You have somebody that has won in this league. He's won a playoff game. So for him, you have to wonder how good the supporting cast is around him, right? And that's really where we get to the meat of the problems for the Atlanta Falcons. You look at the offensive line. Outside of left tackle Jake Matthews and right guard Chris Lindstrom, the Falcons' offensive line is pretty rough. Jalen Mayfield wasn't good last year, and in many people's eyes, he was one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL. Not just one of the worst offensive guards in the league, but he was one of the worst offensive linemen in the whole entire league. So we knew when he was coming out of college that he was going to be more of a project player. So, of course, he was going to struggle last season. But you are looking to see how much he's going to improve this season. Now, if Jalen Mayfield can just be at least if he can just be 2 times better than what he was last season, that's major improvement. And if he ends up having a Pro Bowl caliber season, then he definitely should be the most improved player in the NFL. So, for Jalen Mayfield, his 2021 campaign was really underwhelming. And we don't really know how much he's going to develop this season. Now, of course, if you're a Falcons fan, you're going to say that Jalen Mayfield's going to develop because you're a Falcons fan. You're biased. So, of course, you're going to be optimistic about him. But for somebody who's not a Falcons fan that doesn't have no biases towards this team, I think that it's going to be pretty rough seeing Jalen Mayfield take a lot of steps in improvement. Because offensive guard is one of those impact positions, right? It's one of those positions that you draft and it doesn't really take long to get high production out of there. So I think that this is a really big year for Jalen Mayfield, because if he struggles again this season, he'll probably end up being the backup next year. Then when you look at center, I think that Matt Hennessy really is just a backup at best. I don't really think that he's a great starter. So your center position isn't really all that great, and that's really important. I don't think a lot of people realize how important it is to have a good center in the NFL. When you look at some of the best offensive lines that we have right now, they all have great centers. The center is the quarterback of the offensive line. He's somebody who helps get everybody in check. He's calling out, he's pretty much quarterbacking the O-line in a sense. So if you don't have a good center, 9 times out of 10, your offensive line is not going to be that great. He's the communicator. He is the enforcer. He's the sheriff. So the center position doesn't give me a lot of hope. And Caleb McGarry, he's a solid run blocker, but if his pass protection continues to be shaky, then you're probably going to have to end up moving on from him. Now, you did bring in Jermaine Ifedi there, who is supposed to be competing with Caleb McGarry for that starting right tackle spot. But I still think that Caleb McGarry should end up winning out, because I don't think Caleb McGarry is all that bad. I mean, he's a pretty good run blocker. You just would like for him to be a little bit better in pass protection. So, for the offensive line, I don't really have a lot of confidence in it. And if the Falcons' offense is going to be good this year, it's all going to start with the big boys up front. You're going to need more than just Chris Lindstrom and Jake Matthews. You're going to need Jalen Mayfield. I think Jalen Mayfield probably is going to be one of the biggest keys, because if he can improve, this offensive line is going to be 3 times better than what it was last year, because he was really the Achilles heel of the O-line. Now, Matt Hennessy, you definitely do need him to step up his play. You definitely do need him to play at a really high level, because as I mentioned earlier, all of the great offensive lines in the NFL, they all start at the center position. So if you're not getting good play out of your center, you're not getting good play out of the majority of your starters on the O-line. So I know there are going to be Falcons fans who are going to say, JT, with the fact that we have a mobile quarterback and Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder, that's going to help out the offensive line, because you're going to have somebody who's going to be able to escape outside the pocket and keep plays alive and improvise. And I understand that, because one thing about Matt Ryan is that he wasn't the most mobile. He was pretty good moving inside of the pocket, but when things broke down, that was it. That was the play. However, a lot of people have this misconception that Just because you have a quarterback that's a good athlete and can run around and extend plays, that's going to help out the offensive line, and that is far from the truth, my friend. If you believe that, then you are sadly misled and mistaken. You better go back and look at how many times Deshaun Watson was sacked during his time with the Houston Texans, and just look at Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has been, the most sacked quarterback in the NFL for over a decade, and he's probably one of the most elusive quarterbacks that we have in this league. So just because you have a quarterback that's good at standing plays and can break the pocket when things break down doesn't mean that's going to improve your offensive line. The thing is that that's good when you can do it on occasions. However, if you have to continue to break outside the pocket and extend plays every single play, that's a problem. And it's not going to win you a lot of games when you're facing teams such as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints that are inside your division. You're going to have solid offensive line play if you're even going to have a shot at shocking the world this year and being able to have more success than what you had last year on offense. So I think the biggest key to the offense really is going to be the offensive line. You look at center. Well, you look at the wide receiver position. We're off center now. The wide receiver position is really interesting. You draft Drake London out of USC. You have Bryan Edwards, who you traded for from the Las Vegas Raiders. And you have Auden Tate. And then the slide looks like you're going to have Amalea Zaccheaus and Demary Bird. So the wide receiver position isn't all that great. You do have a lot of young players that have a lot of potential. I think that Drake London could end up being a beast. And after we saw the season that Jamar Chase had, Justin Jefferson, these rookie wide receivers over the last couple of years have been coming in and they've been going off right away. And for Falcons fans, there are many that have high expectations for Drake London, and rightfully so. So if you're one of those Falcons fans that are going to come in and say, man, we got to give Drake London some time, we shouldn't be putting all this pressure on him, stop talking. We have wide receivers coming in that are breaking records, setting records, doing all kinds of crazy stuff nowadays. So for Drake London, if you're a Falcons fan, you have every right to expect him to be over 1,000 yards or more this year. If you draft a wide receiver in the top 10, you're expecting him to immediately become one of the better wide receivers at his position. He doesn't have to be top 5. He doesn't have to be Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, what they were in his rookie season, but you at least are expecting him to be Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith was really good last year. He just kept getting overthrown by Jalen Hurts more times than not. So I like Drake London. My question is that I don't really think that he creates a lot of separation on his routes. And I definitely think that his route running needs a little bit of some refinement. And that's the same thing that can be said for pretty much all of the outside receivers on Atlanta's roster. Bryan Edwards, if you listen to any Las Vegas Raiders fan, after the trade, they said that they were sad to see him go. They actually wanted him to get another shot, but many people would say that Bryan Edwards struggled to create separation on his routes. This was somebody who was a 50-50 ball maestro, I pretty much call him. And the reason for that can be a positive and a negative. If you're good at being able to catch 50-50 balls, that means you're really physical. You're really good at being able to win those one-on-ones outside. However, the downside of that is that if you always have to end up catching 50-50 balls, that probably means that you're not all that great at creating separation. You don't have great long speed downfield. So for Bryan Edwards, inside of this offense, you're going to have to need him to improve his ability to create separation, because Marcus Mariota isn't really the greatest quarterback when it comes to throwing the football downfield. I think that he's more better in the short and intermediate range. So for Bryan Edwards, I think that if you're going to see him end up reaching his potential, he has to improve his ability to get off the line, and he has to improve his ability to create separation from these cornerbacks. You have Auden Tate. Auden Tate is somebody that kind of was held back by Cincinnati simply for the fact that they had so much talent at wide receiver. He's also a physical, big body wide receiver that can get those 50-50 balls, but as the problem with the other wide receivers is that you don't know how good he is when it comes to creating separation. So for these wide receivers, outside of Drake London, Bryan Edwards, Auden Tate, they're not the greatest athletes. So they have to get better when it comes to route running and how they release off the line. You look at slot, I like Amalea Zaccheaus. I think that he is a pretty okay option to have in the slot. I've been watching him from his time in Virginia. I'm rooting for him. I think that he can end up being one of the more better options in the passing game simply for the fact that that's where Marcus Mariota excels at. Then you have the Mary Bird, who probably is the fastest wide receiver that you have on the roster. So those are pretty much the only speed guys that you have. And that's another thing that a lot of people have criticized about the Falcons offense is that they don't have that much speed downfield. So this is really an offense that's going to be predicated on running the football, setting up play action, and trying to get those one-on-ones downfield. Now, you do have Kyle Pitts, who is coming off the greatest rookie season that we may have ever seen out of a rookie tight end. And pretty much the majority of the passing game was ran through Kyle Pitts, which either Kyle Pitts or you was throwing it to Cordell Patterson out of the backfield. So for Kyle Pitts, I'm excited to see what he does in year 2 with the Falcons. He definitely is going to be the best option that they have in the passing game this year. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's probably going to be over 100 targets, probably going to be maxed out between 120 and 130 targets this year, because last year it seemed as if Matt Ryan was just saying, F it. Kyle Pitts is somewhere down there, if you guys ever seen the meme. And when you look at running back, the run game is definitely going to be really critical or really crucial for the Falcons this season, because when you listen to Arthur Smith and what he has talked about in terms of what he's looking for out of this offense this season, he said that he doesn't want to be put in a lot of obvious passing situations. And what he's referring to is that when third down comes along, he doesn't want to find himself having to be in third and long situations, because then your offensive line, which already isn't all that great, is put at even more of a disadvantage, because now those pass rushers can pin their ears back and play the pass and just go after the quarterback. So your offense is going to be a little bit better when you have a little bit of unpredictability there. So if Atlanta is going to be able to avoid those obvious passing situations, they have to be able to win on the early downs. You have to be able to pick up 4 or 5 yards on first down. And it's going to start with that run game. Now, the Falcons had the second worst rushing attack in the NFL last season. They were 31st in rushing yards per game at 85.4. Now, Cordell Patterson, I love him. He was on my fantasy football team last year. He was a major reason why I was able to win some of the championships that I did last year. So I like him. And even though he isn't really a full-fledged running back, I like what he brings from the Falcons from a schematic standpoint, with the fact that he's kind of a big mismatch for most linebackers, because you don't really see too many running backs that are as good as running routes from the running back position, such as Cordell Patterson, having that wide receiver background. So he's going to be a weapon. He still is going to get the most plays out of any running back in this room, simply for the fact that he's probably their best third down option, just because he has the best hands. You have Damian Williams, who, let's be honest, I mean, he's just there. He's probably going to have a little bit of a role, but honestly, we're really looking at Cordell Patterson, who's going to be that scat back for Atlanta, and Tyler Algier, who is a rookie out of BYU, who the Falcons drafted in the 5th round. And there are many Falcons fans who are really excited about Tyler Algier. He is 5'11", 224 pounds. Even though he doesn't have great speed, he ran a 4.6 during his 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. He's a really tough, physical, gritty runner. He has great vision, phenomenal contact balance. He reminds me a lot of Michael Turner. You Falcons fans remember him? A lot of similarities to Michael Turner. Tough, can churn out those tough yards. He's going to be their short yardage back in goal line situations or in 3rd and inches situation. If there's going to be a short yardage package that Atlanta's going to implement this year, Tyler Algier is going to be part of it. Now, he needs to improve his pass blocking, and he needs to become better when it comes to catching the football out of the backfield if he's going to become the Falcons' full 3-down back. Now, You also have Mariota and Desmond Ridder, whoever's going to be the starter. They're also going to be incorporated in the run game as well, because one of the reasons why Atlanta's run game was so bad is because Matt Ryan simply didn't have any wheels, and that's always been the thing with Matt Ryan's game. He never has been tabbed as a mobile quarterback, so the fact that you have two quarterbacks that have the ability to run at a pretty high level, that's going to be incorporated into this offense, so you're probably going to see a lot of read option, a lot of design quarterback runs. So overall, when I'm looking at this offense, I don't think this offense is going to be all that great this year. I definitely think that the offense probably could be slightly better than what it was last season. You're probably going to be in the high 20 range, but the offensive line definitely is a big concern. I mean, Falcons fans, you can pray to the football gods that Jalen Mayfield improves. And I mean, improvement is better than no improvement, because how he played last year, you'll take anything that you can get. But it's looking really rough. You also have questions at wide receiver. How much separation are they going to be able to create? So this is an offense that they're going to be slightly better. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be enough to merit anything that's going to really shock the world or anything like that. So I think this offense, you know, you do have a lot of promise there with some of the guys. You do have Tyler Algier, who I like a lot. I'm probably going to be picking him up on a handful of my fantasy football teams. But this offensive line is really going to hold this team back, because when you have wide receivers who aren't that great at creating separation, you're going to have to give them a little time to get downfield. It's going to take a while. Then also, you're going to have to be able to create holes for these running backs to run through. And with the offensive line that Atlanta has right now not really improving all that much, they didn't really improve at all. I just think that this offense is still going to be in for another tough season. So you guys let me know how you guys are feeling about the Atlanta Falcons offense going into the upcoming 2022 NFL season. Make sure that you guys check out the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available, and I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast.